Every fighter has weaknesses. Some are more obvious, while others are more subtle. And in this video, I will go over what I think are the weaknesses of every current UFC champion in UFC. I will go over some fight attributes that I think are in their disadvantage. And I will be starting off with the usual flyweight division with Alexandre Pantoja, maybe the most underrated champ we have in UFC. And for him, I picked that his weakness is knockout power or punch power in general. The last time this guy finished someone by TKO was back in 2019, and ever since then I can't really recall when was the last time he dropped someone with a strike. If y'all remember, let me know in the comments. His grappling and durability are as good as it gets, but his power ain't really there. I've heard rumors about him moving up to bantamweight because there is no one really left for him to fight at flyweight, because he literally cleared the whole top 10. But that move to bantamweight and gaining some size might give him the necessary power to have the knockout threat as well. That would make him even more dangerous, and a few finishes by knockout as well would really make him a beast at bantamweight if he makes the move. You know, like having the opponent scared by not only his elite grappling, but by the power of his punches too, would make him so complete as a fighter. He'd also go higher in the pound for pound rankings for having a more diverse and dominant resume. And I think that a move to bantamweight would benefit him a lot. Yeah, he might not be as quick if he moves, but it wouldn't make that huge of a difference in that regard, because there are not that many pounds to gain to make him significantly slower, but enough to make him significantly more powerful. Moving on to Merab at bantamweight, I think right now the only weakness for Merab is reckless movement, because Merab is the type of fighter that wants to constantly push forward to overwhelm you with pressure and his absurd amount of cardio and pace. He tends to rush recklessly in the void, as DJ calls it, and that might end up badly for him at some point. We've seen that happen a couple of times in his fight with Umar. Umar was managing to time his counters and catch him with a cross down the middle and tag his chin a few times. Sean O'Malley managed to do that as well. Henry Cejudo, who is not even a striker, hurts Merab because of him rushing recklessly into a space where he can't really beat the timing of someone like O'Malley or Umar. Like, yeah, sure, props to his cardio for outpacing his opponents, and props to his chin for holding up until now. But with every hard hit taken by that chin, it cracks more and more, and someone will break it one day if the timing is correct. Moving to Ilia Topuria, you might have thought that I will find no weakness, or I will hardly find one, but I actually found one pretty easily. Ilia's weakness is his susceptibility to leg kicks or calf kicks. Now, it's pretty clear to everybody that you can't stand and bang with Ilia Topuria, okay? Max and Volk learned it the hard way, but what they did good in their short time fighting Topuria, and what we've learned from them, is that Ilia Topuria's heavily boxing style stance is very susceptible to calf kicks. If there is someone who could keep his distance from Topuria's bombs for 2 or 3 rounds, and meanwhile land calf kicks over and over, they would take away his explosiveness, and his stance will be faulty, and it will force him to switch stances, where, of course, they could chop his calf again and jab him away and circle around whenever he puts pressure. I think a very good example is what Max did for the first 2 rounds. A bit more volume in calf kicks and maybe some oblique kicks, and there you go. I said it as if it's that easy. He puts so much weight on that front foot where he generates the power from to land those devastating hooks, and chopping his calf over and over would benefit his opponents a lot. Moving to Islam. Now, this was the hardest one. This was really hard to think about, and I wouldn't even call it a weakness, because there is no place in that octagon you can take Islam and make him be in disadvantage. I will say that this is not a weakness, but it's the most manageable aspect of Islam's game when someone fights him. His takedown attempts in the open. At first I was thinking about leg kicks for him too, but he manages to keep his distance very well and evades all pressure, leaving almost no openings. You could say that he kind of runs away from, you know, heavy stand and bang sequences, but that's what is smart about him. He avoids unnecessary damage very well. But going back to the takedown attempts in the middle of the octagon are the most manageable when someone fights him. Most of his takedowns come from having his opponents back on the cage. That's when, you know, you are going to get ragdolled. But when he shoots for a takedown out in the open, they are not really his strong point. I mean, Dustin managed to stuff some of them, and Islam doesn't really go for them as much. But yeah, that's pretty much everything I can think of when it comes to Islam. Yeah, I know he took Moicano down out in the open, but it's Moicano, so we move on. Next is Bilal at welterweight. fight. And I think his weakness is that he has no finishing ability. I feel like he is a really good fighter, but he is not good enough at anything in a particular to use that in his advantage to finish his opponents. Like, all right, his wrestling is good. He can take down his opponents, but he can't submit them. His striking is mid. He can land some, but he has no power to knock out anyone. He can only score points, win rounds, and look good on paper in the eyes of the judges. Like, if you don't use your ability to take down people to submit them, if you don't use your ability to hit your opponents to knock them out, a fight can always turn around, and he can get finished at any moment after scoring good on the judges' scorecards for 4 rounds. You know, finish off your opponents before they finish you off, pause. Moving on to Dracus at middleweight, I feel like his lack of technique is his weakness. Even though this lack of technique got him to where he is, I believe that it's got to a point where someone like Khamzat, who only goes for the finish and literally doesn't give a fuck about winning rounds, could very easily capitalize off of Dracus's very chaotic style. Like, this style can only take him so far. I mean, yeah, sure, I think he will beat Strickland again, but a killer like Khamzat won't hesitate to just go for the kill on Dracus, and his lack of base technique will be the end of him. At light heavyweight, we got Alex Pereira, and I think his biggest weakness fighting abilities wise is his overall wrestling. We've seen him struggle when he fought Jan Blachowicz in the grappling, and other than that, nobody really challenged his wrestling abilities. I fear that his fight with Ankalaev might turn out bad for him, even though at the same time I think Ankalaev is in the same bracket with all the others that wanted to just stand with Pereira and not wrestle. Like, that's just the worst idea you could possibly have if you fight Pereira. But yeah, I think his biggest weakness is his grappling. He can keep on posting jiu-jitsu videos on his Instagram, but I still don't think it's good enough to not be in disadvantage if Ankalaev decides to have a brain and actually take Pereira down. Moving to John Jones at heavyweight, I think besides getting old and getting slower, I will pick something that I've seen throughout his whole career. I think John's weakness relied in pure boxing fundamentals like head movement, footwork, and mostly defense, I'd say. I've seen in a lot of his fights that any opponent who can just blitz through and enter the pocket with a 3-punch combination. John got tagged on a couple of occasions. The Dominic Reyes fight is the best example of John's vulnerable boxing defense. Generally, everyone who enters the cage with John, they are most likely to let John push the pace because they are cautious about his elbows and knees. But if someone managed to take control and give John a run for his money, enter the pocket with a combination, blitz through the guard, and put him up against the cage where he can't make distance anymore, I think they would have cracked him a couple of times. And yeah, these were my weaknesses for every UFC champion right now. Let me know in the comments what you agree and disagree on. Subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next time.